Good morning, Auroville. This is Abhijit with you again, and I'm back at Auroville Radio with my series on exploring education in arts, animation, and filmmaking. Today, I bring you another topic in animation. In my earlier episodes on animation, I have been exploring the 12 principles of character animation. Today are the last four, and I'm starting with the ninth character animation principle called timing. The number of drawings used in any move determines the amount of time that action will take on the screen. If the drawings are simple, clear, and expressive, the story point can be put over quickly. And this is all that concerned the animators during the early period. Timing in those cartoons was limited mainly to fast moves and slow moves, with accents and thrusts calling for special handling. But the personalities that were developing were defined more by their movements than their appearance, and the varying speed of those movements determined whether the character was lethargic, excited, nervous, or relaxed. Neither acting nor attitude could be portrayed without paying very close attention to timing. The complicated relationships that came with secondary actions and overlapping movements called for extensive refinements, but even the most basic moves showed the importance of timing and the constant need for more study. Just two drawings of a head, the first showing it leaning toward the right shoulder and the second with it over to the left and its chin slightly raised, can be made to communicate a multitude of ideas, depending entirely on the timing used. Each in-between drawing added between these two extremes gives a new meaning to the action. So if there are no in-betweens, the character is being hit by a tremendous force, his head is nearly snapped off. One in-between has been hit by a brick, rolling pin, frying pan. Two in-betweens has a nervous tic, a muscle spasm, an uncontrollable twitch. Three in-betweens is dodging the brick, rolling pin, or frying pan. Four in-betweens is giving a crisp order, get going, move it. Five in-betweens is more friendly, over here, come on, hurry. Six in-between sees a good-looking girl or the sports car he has always wanted. Seven in-betweens tries to get a better look at something. Eight in-betweens searches for the peanut butter on the kitchen shelf. Nine in-betweens appraises, considering thoughtfully. 10 in-betweens stretches a sore muscle. The persistent question from the animators was, begin quote, when do you use ones and when do you use twos, end quote. This referred to the number of frames of film to be shot of a single drawing. One exposure was called ones and two exposures twos. It had long been known that for most normal action there was no need to make a new drawing for every frame of the film. Each drawing could occupy two of the previous frames, and the audience would never detect it at 24 frames a second. This saved immense amount of work and in the slower movements gave a smoother appearance to the action. More than that, a fast action on twos had more sparkle and spirit than the same action with in-betweens, which tended to make the timing too even and remove the vitality. Anytime there was a pan move in which the character's feet or a point of the contact with the background were shown, the action had to be on ones to match the moves of the pan, or there would be a slippage which looked peculiar. Similarly, if the camera were moving in any direction which must be on ones, there would be a strange jittering unless the character's actions were also on ones. When more elaborate actions were called for and more delicate changes had to be seen, the animators resorted to the use of ones, sometimes throughout the scene and otherwise only in certain places. A scramble action or speed gag, a sharp accent or flurry of activity, the payoff after a big anticipation, all needed ones. But the choice was still difficult to make if the animator had not gone through a period of experimenting and trying, and failing, and trying again. Only then did they build up a backlog of experience that would guide them through these perpetual decisions. Principle number 10. Exaggeration. There was some confusion among the animators when they were first asked for more realism and then criticized the result because it was not exaggerated enough. In their mind, there was probably no difference. They believed in going to the heart of anything and developing the essence of what they found. If a character was to be sad, make it more sad. Bright, make them brighter. Worried, more worried. Wild, make them wilder. Some of the artists had felt that exaggeration meant more distorted drawings or an action so violent it was disturbing. They found they had been missed. When they were asked for realism, it meant a caricature of realism. One artist analyzed it correctly when he said, begin quote, I don't think it meant realism. I think it meant something that was more convincing, that made a bigger contact with people, and it was presented as realism because real things do. Every so often in animation, the character would do something unconvincing or to show how clever the animator was, and it wasn't real. It was phony. It would not be accepted because it destroyed believability, but seldom was an animator asked to tame down an action if the idea was right for the scene. End quote. An animator told of a test he had done of a character riding along in his taxicab, whistling with everything on the car rattling and bouncing. When they came to the corner, the car skidded and blew out a tire, at which point the car sagged, the license plate twirled over, and landed with its numbers upside down and spelling, "Oh heck!" The animator was sure that was a laugh, and he was careful to stage it so that it could not be missed. Evidently, he had not considered the whole car as carefully, for he received a complaint of the lack of action and was asked to do it over. The next test received the same reaction. It's not broad enough. It's not funny. 6 times the animator corrected the action, erasing and redrawing until he was nearly through the paper. And still the supervisor did not feel the action was spirited enough for what he wanted. At that point, the animator got fed up and said, the only thing I knew to do was to do something they wouldn't take, to make it so extreme that they would say, I don't mean that much. So I went back and did something horribly distorted. I was kind of proud of myself and couldn't wait for the film to come back. I put it on the editing machine. The supervisor came, ran it a few times, then stepped back and looked at me. I thought he was going to tell me to leave the studio. But he said, there, that's just what I wanted. It taught me to do at the studio. From then on, I never had any trouble with exaggeration. When I started directing, I used to say to the animators, will you do something for me? Will you make it so extreme that you make me mad? 11th principle. Solid drawing. The old-timers were hard-pressed to keep up with the demands of the new type of animation. More than one top man counseling the beginners. Begin quote. You should learn to draw as well as possible before starting to animate. End quote. One animator whose animation career started in 1924 pointed out, again quotes, the better you can draw, the easier it will be for you. You will have to draw the character in all positions and from every angle, and if you can't do that and have to stage it for some other angle, it's very restrictive and takes longer. End quote. Another animator was more philosophical a few years later. Again quoting, drawing is giving a performance. An artist is an actor who is not limited by his body, only by his ability and perhaps experience. End quote. Too many of the men, old and new, were full of tricks and techniques that had looked great in cartooning school but did nothing for them at the studio. The little shadows under the toes of the shows, the slick line, the flashy verve of clothing reacting to violent exertion, all these devices that were impressive in high school were of little use anymore. Signs were hung on many walls where the young trainees would be sure to see them, and one of the best was this: does your drawing have weight, depth, and balance? A casual reminder of the basics of solid three-dimensional drawing. Animators had devoted their whole lives to the mastery of these elusive principles. And there was also that sign that pointed to the nearest exit. Another sign admonished the animators to watch out for twins in their drawings. This is the unfortunate situation where both arms or legs are not only parallel but doing exactly the same thing. No one draws this way on purpose, and usually the artist is not even aware that they have done it. This affliction was not limited to the 30s, for again in the 70s, young animators were annoyed to find twins in their drawings, no matter how hard they worked to keep them out. Again I'm quoting, "It was one of the first drawing principles that were heard of at the studios. If you get into acting, you would never think of expressing an emotion with twins anywhere. But somehow in a drawing, if you are not thinking, it creeps in time and again." End quote. Their main search was for an animatable shape, one that had volume but was still flexible, possessed strength without rigidity, and gave them opportunities for the movements that put over the ideas. They needed a shape that was a living form, ready to move, in contrast with the static form. They used the term plastic, and just the definition of the word seemed to convey the feeling of potential activity in the drawing. Capable of being shaped or formed, also known as pliable. And now we come to the last, that is the 12th principle of character animation, appeal. Appeal was very important from the start. The word is often misinterpreted to suggest cuddly bunnies and soft kittens. To the animators, it meant anything that a person likes to see. A quality of charm, pleasing design, simplicity, communication, and magnetism. Your eye is drawn to the figure that has appeal, and once there, it is held while you appreciate what you are seeing. A striking heroic figure can have appeal. A villainess, even though chilling and dramatic, should have appeal. Otherwise, you will not want to watch what she is doing. The ugly and repulsive may capture your gaze, but there will be neither the building of character nor identification with the situation that will be needed. There is shock value, but no story strength. A weak drawing lacks appeal. A drawing that is complicated or hard to read lacks appeal. Poor design, clumsy shapes, awkward moves, all are low on appeal. Spectators enjoy watching something that is appealing to them, whether an expression, a character, a movement, or a whole story situation. While the live actor has charisma, the animated drawing has appeal. Young people excited about the great successes achieved with line drawing are always perplexed to hear that delicate refinements are not possible in this medium. They recall scenes of great beauty and pictures with strong emotions and cannot see that there is any problem in communication. But the problem is there, in every scene and every day. Since the medium lacks the subtle shadow patterns on the face that can reveal the shades of the character in a person, we must concentrate on the acting or the story structure. Delicate expressions can be misinterpreted to everyone's confusion, and attempting too much refinement can make the drawing so restrained or involved that no communication is possible. Only simple and direct attitudes make good drawings, and without good drawings, we have little appeal. The whole idea of trying to communicate feelings with mere lines does seem ridiculous at times. There is always the temptation to get in close so the audience can really see how the character is reacting. But the close-up presents the greatest problems. An animator once said in 1938, when questioned about the advisability of using extreme close-ups, begin quote, "The face begins to flatten out when you get too close on it. We are attempting to overcome that now with a new dye process, but it will be some time before it's perfected. End quote. It never was. Many great effects are possible, but too often they cost more than the average production can afford. The constant battle is to find the elements that will look best in this medium and still allow the strongest communication of the idea presented. In those times, a drawing had to be made in line, duplicated on cells, painted on flat colors, photographed over a background, and projected onto a giant screen. Tiny sensitive lines on the drawings are now enlarged until they are more than a foot wide and very, very black. In the mid-30s, they wished for shading, for textures, for areas with no outlines, but that was not practical. They had to find other ways of putting over the points in the scenes, and in doing so, developed character animation into a communicative art that astounded the world. But at the time, there was neither glory nor pride in their efforts, only the nagging limitations. As they passed each other in the hall, they shook their heads and shared the thought, "It's a crude medium." Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for tuning in.
This is Auroville Radio, voices from the city of dawn.